It's Wednesday, May 15. In the headlines, murders down by 24%. In business news, we bring the latest movements across the local and regional markets. Regionally, Antigua and Barbuda to forge diplomatic relations with Palestine. And in sports, reggae boy Andre Blake signs on as ambassador for JUSTBET. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. Murders have gone down by 24% over the last 6 months when compared with the preceding 6-month period, and gang wars are also on the decline. The data was shared by National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang during his contribution to the sectoral debate on Tuesday. The National Security Minister says the number of gangs across the country has been considerably reduced, and they are now smaller and less organized.
2024, at the beginning, there was 244 active gangs. So far this year, we have only identified 106 active gangs.
He notes that 27 convictions have been handed down in 5 trials.
There are 5 gang matters before the court, and 3 are near going to the court, and overall there are 64 under active investigation. When they are under investigation, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, they tend to get quieter, move out, disperse, and therefore doing less damage.
The Security Minister says for 2024, murder is trending down following an 8% reduction in 2023.
But we accept and agree that the homicide rate is still too high. Yes. Unacceptable. Yes. Unacceptable. It is being carried out largely by drive-by shooting, mostly shooting on the road, besides domestic issues where conflicts take place.
Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says his team intends to improve the credibility and aesthetics of Jamaica's health centers. He says the project, dubbed Operation Refresh, has a budget of $1 billion. He was speaking at this week's post-cabinet press brief. Dr. Tufton says plans are in place to reclassify health centers.
It's a big push because it means something tangible. So, for example, the reclassification means that we're adding 370 new doctors to health centers, which means that more doctors will be in the health centers. It means that we're adding more nurses. It means that we're providing more curative services. So instead of going to the hospital for certain services, you can get it at the health center. It means that there'll be more outreach in communities, visitation in homes and communities. In other words, it's an attempt at making our health center provide greater utility to keep people in the communities as opposed to the crowding out of hospitals for final services.
He says refresh means re-credibility of health centers.
More often than not, people in our communities bypass the health center and go straight to the hospital. And it's kind of logical why they would think that way. They think they get a one-stop shop type of approach to the hospital. They go there and that's where all the doctors are, all the specialists are, that sort of thing. So the idea is not just to add more services, but to make the health center as a physical facility in the community look the part, feel the part, and convince people to want to stop there.
The health minister also informed that in keeping with the push for transformation of the health sector, all health centers should be easily identified.
There are some health centers, when we took office as a government, that you really don't know is a health center when you're passing it in the community. And identification means signage and proper signage. It means adding, the name, obviously, the services that it provides, the times that it provides those services are days of the week and times of the day. It means any additional useful information about the health center. So the health center becomes very, very recognizable.
The Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC, is to receive 100 buses in July. Transport Minister Darrell Vaz says based on an update he received recently, the buses are ready. He says they are completely manufactured and they are now awaiting a shipping date which could be as early as June. And the buses should arrive in Jamaica in mid-July. According to Minister Vaz, the new buses will give further comfort to students when the new school term begins in September. He notes that the buses will bring the number of new buses added to the fleet of the JUTC to 170 since 2023. Minister Vaz was speaking at the inaugural Caribbean Spectrum Management Conference held in Montego Bay, St. James recently. Opposition leader Mark Golding says the People's National Party does not support the idea of a referendum being used to determine the country's final appellate court. The UK-based Privy Council remains Jamaica's final court. However, with the overhaul of Jamaica's constitution and with the aim of becoming a constitutional republic, the argument of adopting the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, as its top court has come to the forefront. Mr. Golding says that the responsibility cannot be laid on Jamaicans, but that the government must be forthcoming with its decision on the CCJ. The opposition leader was speaking based on a report from the Constitutional Reform Committee during a media briefing Tuesday morning at the People's National Party's headquarters in St. Andrew.
We must move with full confidence in the Caribbean Court of Justice. It is an institution of excellence that has been designed to be both independent of political influence and accessible to our people at an affordable cost. It is a regional institution that Jamaica helped to design and establish.
Mr. Golding says the government had initially indicated that adopting the CCJ would not be dealt with upfront. He says this should not be done on a phased basis, though.
We will not support a phased approach to dealing with the matter of full decolonization, because the phased approach does not guarantee its attainment. It may never happen if we do it that way. The arrangements for access to our people's final court need to get away from visa requirements. We need to get away from rules of court that are in conflict with and whittle down our constitutional rights of appeal. We need to get away from the exorbitant costs of appealing to a final court in London.
He's arguing that the matter of reforming the country's constitution is a fundamental issue of governance.
As I have said, this matter will govern generations to come, and we must allow and follow our conscience and do what we believe to be right by the Jamaican people. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness has responded to some of the views of the leader of the opposition, Mark Golding. He says he had met with Mr. Golding and it was agreed that some aspects of the constitutional reform would be done on a phased basis.
We ended up having a meeting under the auspices of the Vale Royal talks. I thought those were good meetings, and we came to an understanding that the process would be a phased process, that we would move on the matters on which we agreed, which would be the Jamaica becoming a republic, and the other matters that were a little bit more complex, on which consensus ought to be fully realized, that those would come in the second phase of the process.
Mr. Holness says with that, there was a reasonable expectation that they were proceeding with good faith. He also addressed the matter on inclusion of the Jamaican society in reviewing the present constitution.
And you would recall that there were some issues about the membership, and we reviewed that, and we extended the process of consultation to include island-wide consultation and specific interest group consultation. So my own view on it is that the CRC, the Constitutional Reform Committee, Review Committee, they have done quite an extensive job.
The Prime Minister was speaking at Wednesday morning's post-cabinet press briefing. Time now for the business report with Denise Williams.
Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Business Report. I'm Denise Williams, your guide through the latest happenings in the world of business. Key Insurance Company Limited, for the first quarter ending March 31, 2024, reported a 19% increase in insurance revenue, totaling $697.51 million Jamaican dollars compared to $585.01 million in the corresponding 3 months last year. Insurance services expense amounted to $497.79 million compared to the 2023 figure of $430.39 million. This represents an increase of 16% year over year. Consequently, net premiums written increased by 29% to $199.72 million compared to $154.62 million for the first quarter ending March 31, 2023. As a result, net profit after taxation for the 3 months amounted to $9.94 million Jamaican dollars, growing well over the 2023 figure of $3.53 million Jamaican dollars. Cargo Handlers Limited, for the 6 months ended March 31, 2024, reported a 5% decrease in revenue, totaling $272.78 million compared to the $287.94 million Jamaican dollars in the corresponding period last year. Net profit for the 6 months amounted to $104.48 million, a 31% decrease from the $150.91 million Jamaican dollars reported in 2023. Regency Petroleum Limited, for the first quarter ended March 31, 2024, reported a 121% increase in gross operating revenue, totaling $404.68 million Jamaican dollars compared to $183.48 million Jamaican dollars in the corresponding 3 months last year. Cost of sales amounted to $336.18 million compared to the 2023 figure of $150.98 million. This represents an increase of 123% year over year. There was no taxation reported for the quarter. Net profit for the 3 months amounted to $33.76 million, a 71% increase from the $19.74 million reported in 2023. During trading for the period of May 14, 2024, the following companies valued at 500 million Jamaican dollars or more in assets represents the overall volume leaders in terms of equity sales on the main market of the Jamaica Stock Exchange. JMB Group, 7.25%, variable rate, JMD, cumulative rate, preference shares with 17,000,005 units amounted to 53.98% of the main market volume in terms of sales. Wigton Wind Farm Limited ordinary shares with 7,596,626 units amounted to 24.12% of the main market volume in terms of sales. Massey Holdings Limited with 1,400,344 units amounting to 4.45% of the main market volume in terms of sales. During trading for the period of May 14, 2024 on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, the following companies represent the overall volume of leaders in terms of sales of equity on the junior stock market, with companies valued at 50 million Jamaican dollars or more in asset value. Fosrich Company Limited with 1,161,056 units amounted to 25.49% of the junior market volume in terms of sales. Dollar Financial Services Limited with 665,331 units amounted to 14.61% of the junior market in terms of sales. Jamaica Fiberglass Limited with 591,969 units, amounted to 13% of the junior market in terms of sales. Over on the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, trading on May 14, 2024 registered a volume of 213,890 shares, crossing the floor of the exchange valued at $3,167,448 Trinidad and Tobago dollars and 8 cents. Massey Holdings Limited was the volume leader with 97,886 shares, changing hands for a value of $410,142 Trinidad and Tobago dollars and 34 cents, followed by Guardian Holdings Limited with a volume of 67,084 shares being traded for $1,140,515 Trinidad and Tobago dollars. Moving from the money moves of investors, executives, and companies, we turn to the Forex market. On May 14, 2024, the Bank of Jamaica reported that US $44.2 million was bought from Forex traders, while US $48.2 million was sold to Forex traders. Buying directly from the Bank of Jamaica, foreign currency traders sold the US dollar for $156.72 and bought the US dollars for 155.8 cents. The difference between the buy and sell rate was $1.64, which represents a profit for Forex traders for every US dollar traded. Canadian Forex traders earned a trading profit of $1.43 from transactions with the Bank of Jamaica. The Canadian dollar was sold at $115.26 and bought for $113.83. For traders looking at the British pound, they pocketed a profit of $2.51, selling it for $196.43 and buying it for $193.92. For our credit report tip of the day, it's so awesome to be working by the time you turn 18. However, we want to encourage you to budget wisely. Create a budget that allocates funds for essentials, savings, and any credit card payments. Stick to it religiously to avoid overspending and accumulating debt. And with that, we wrap up today's business report. I'm Denise Williams. Appreciate your company. Stay well informed, stay ahead of the curve. Until our next update, take care.
In regional news, overfishing remains a major concern across Barbados and the region. To combat this issue, Exercise Trade Winds 2024 has added a new component to encompass this significant area. Members of the media were invited to the Barbados Coast Guard Pelican ship to observe various aspects of maritime training. Rachel Agard has that story.
The newest addition to the maritime track, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities, the IUUF, means more than overfishing in the Caribbean waters. It also addresses a bigger threat of human trafficking and narcotics smuggling. Barbados' lead planner for Exercise Trade Winds 2024 maritime track, Sub-Lieutenant Sasha Marshall, says this year the maritime track training focused on 6 components, most of all the IUUF.
Long-term, IUU fishing can have devastating socio-economic impacts on the countries affected. Having recognized the importance of combating IUU fishing, the planners thought it necessary to give this track its own component for the first time during these trade winds.
Lead U.S. Maritime Law Enforcement Planner, Commander Anita Williams, says the Coast Guard's role as guardians in the maritime realm has never been more critical.
As members of the Coast Guard of all Caribbean nations, we stand at the forefront of maritime security, entrusted with a solemn duty to protect life, property, and the marine environment.
During a maritime simulation, a 47-foot longliner was intercepted by regional Coast Guard officers. A search was conducted and netted a quantity of illegal narcotics sea turtles, shark fins, cash, and a firearm. On board was a captain, 2 crew members, and 1 person who was suspected of being trafficked. Meanwhile, Chief Fisheries Officer Dr. Shelley-Ann Cox says the Fisheries Division has been using platforms showing boats from different countries in Barbados's waters contributing to illegal fishing.
With the longline fishery, the targeted species, sometimes there is bycatch, and things like shark finning in the future will be prohibited. We also have a list of prohibited species that will be coming on board, including the ocean white-tip shark, as well as the big-eye treasure.
Dr. Cox says the training at the maritime track is important, but more will have to be done. Rachel Agard, CBC News.
Antigua and Barbuda is moving to concretize diplomatic ties with Palestine, insisting this is the fair approach since it has these ties with Israel. The country's top diplomat in Washington, D.C., Sir Ronald Saunders, told ABS News he has received instructions on this matter from Prime Minister Gaston Brown. Garfield Burford reports.
Civilians in Gaza continue to pay a heavy price in Israel's war on Hamas. Deaths and injuries are mounting, as are international calls for a ceasefire. Thousands of miles away from Ground Zero in Gaza, the United Nations in New York has been the venue for diplomacy on another key issue, whether Palestine should become a full UN member.
In favor, 143. Against, 9. Abstentions, 25. Draft Resolution A/ES10/L30/Rev1 is adopted.
Antigua and Barbuda was among the 143 states who voted overwhelmingly for that resolution last week. It called on the UN Security Council to bestow full membership to the state of Palestine while enhancing its current mission with a range of new rights and privileges. Antigua and Barbuda's top diplomat in Washington, D.C., Sir Ronald Saunders, says the Twin Island state has been consistent in its stance on full UN membership for Palestine. But the state will now be going a step further.
The Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda has instructed me to explore with the Palestinians the possibility of establishing, of moving beyond just the recognition of Palestine as a state, but also to establish diplomatic relations. I have started that process. We've got a positive response from Palestine, who ranks us to move forward on that, on the question of establishing diplomatic relations in accordance with the Prime Minister's request and the agreement of the Foreign Minister, Chet Green.
He hopes these diplomatic ties can be formalized within weeks. Sir Ronald explains the basis of this move by Antigua and Barbuda.
The reason for that is that we want to be able to talk to Palestine, as we can talk to Israel now, through diplomatic channels, in a formal and informal way. We can't have diplomatic relations with one and not have diplomatic relations with the other if we want to try to promote a peaceful settlement.
And for those who may question this move and believe the country may be meddling in a distant issue, Sir Ronald has this response.
Now people may say, well, what's Antigua getting involved in that for? Well, we're not exactly pushing ourselves here. We are part of the international community. We have to vote on these matters. We have to, as we did in the recent vote of the UNGA that you just mentioned, we repeatedly called on to make our positions known. If that is the case, we have an obligation to talk to both sides, to understand the thinking, and to arrive at a decision based on those conversations.
News from Guyana. In keeping with what was promised at the presentation of the 2024 national budget, Finance Minister Dr. Ashley Singh on Monday announced the commencement of Phase 1 of the student loan write-off. In this first instance, the government will write off all loans owed by Guyanese who can demonstrate that they completed their studies, graduated, and were employed in Guyana for a minimum of 3 years.
We will be moving now to write off all loans owed by Guyanese who are able to demonstrate that they completed their course of study and graduated, and subsequent to graduation were employed or self-employed in Guyana for a minimum of 3 years, as evidenced by a minimum of 156 contributions made to the National Insurance Scheme. This phase one, let me repeat once again for emphasis, this phase one could potentially benefit over 13,000 Guyanese who have $11 billion in student loan debt. Fellow Guyanese, President Ali's One Guyana vision seeks to create a society where all Guyanese, irrespective of where they live, their ethnic or religious background, their political affiliation or gender or other orientation, have the opportunity to lead productive and happy lives. It aims to achieve this by reducing inequality in access to education, health, and other social services, employment and income, and security and justice. In keeping with our One Guyana vision and in line with our party's people-centered approach to development and our manifesto, government remains committed to providing free tertiary education to Guyanese by 2025.
In sports, we kick off with football. Reggae Boys captain Andre Blake has signed an endorsement deal with Supreme Ventures Limited, sports betting brand JUSTBET. Head of marketing at SVL, Kamal Powell, says Andre has represented Jamaica consistently and his talent is undeniable. He's quoted saying his passion for the sport and the high level of leadership and integrity that he displays, which are the core values of Supreme Ventures and JUSTBET. End quote. As part of the sponsorship, SVL will support Blake's charity initiatives for 2024. Blake says this will help to further his efforts to give back to the sport. We look to cricket. In Barbados, the venue for the upcoming ICC Men's T20 Cricket World Cup is ready for action, with 18 days to go until the start of the tournament.
We're less than a month away until the start of the ICC Men's T20 Cricket World Cup. 10 venues across the USA and the Caribbean, with the final set for right here in Barbados at Kensington Oval. And officials are saying that the Oval is ready for the first ball to be bowled on June 2nd. The highly anticipated World Cup will start in the USA on June 1st, with USA taking on Canada, while matches in Barbados will begin the following day. And chairman of the local organizing committee, Ambassador Noah Lynch, says Kensington Oval is fully prepared to host all 9 matches, including the final.
Outfield is the best it has looked, in my opinion, in about 15 years. The pitch is ready. The stands have all been refurbished, cleaned up. All of the bathrooms and all the other common areas around Kensington have been spruced up. There's a huge, if you go in there and look at it, temporary stand facility there. And then there's your hospitality facility. Kensington has been wrapped up to hold 18,000 people. It can hold, we believe, with a push and a shove, it may get another 1,000. But it is an 18,000 seat facility that's ready to host cricket. The longest cricket beach in the world, in any stadium, is there. Everything is ready.
Lynch also revealed that all tickets for the final at the physical box office outside of Kensington Oval are sold out, with the venue's capacity being increased by 7,000 seats.
There's some that were being kept back because of ICC sponsorship and whatever. But the ones that come to Barbados that were available, gone. England versus Australia on June the 8th, gone. Barbados have bought tickets for the World Cup from the manual box office, and another 4,000 or so bought online, Bajans, for the World Cup. So we got people in there.
West Indies, who are 2-time winners of the World Cup, are set to open their campaign on June 2nd against Papua New Guinea at the Providence Stadium in Guyana. Anmar Goodrich Boyce, CBC Sports.
And that's it for the news on PBCJ. Pleasant viewing.